The night was bitter. Frost clung to the porch railings, and every breath came out in sharp white clouds. 8-year-old Emily sat curled against the wooden door, hugging her knees to her chest. Her thin sweater was no match for the freezing wind, and her small shoes, worn through at the soles, let the chill bite into her toes. She had knocked until her fists ached. She had begged through the keyhole, whispering, "Please, please let me in." But the only answer had been the sound of the lock turning, and the voice of her stepmother, cold, sharp, final. "You'll stay out there until you learn not to be a burden." Emily's tears had dried quickly in the wind, leaving faint tracks on her cheeks. Inside, she could still hear faint laughter, the clatter of spoons against bowls. Her stepmother and stepsister were eating the soup Emily had helped stir earlier. The smell of broth drifted through the cracks, taunting her empty stomach. Her arms tightened around herself. She thought of her father, James Carter, who used to lift her onto his shoulders and promise she would always be safe. But he was far away now, working in another city. He sent letters, he sent money. He trusted that his daughter was cared for. Emily wondered if he knew the truth, that the woman he left her with treated her not like family, but like an unwanted stray. A shiver ran through her thin frame. Her lips were pale, her fingers stiff. She whispered to no one, "Please don't let me freeze out here." That was when she heard it, the crunch of footsteps in the snow. Her head snapped up, heart hammering. At first, fear gripped her. What if her stepmother was coming back, angrier than before? But the steps were slower, heavier. A figure appeared at the gate, tall, broad-shouldered, moving closer. Emily's breath caught. She wanted to run, but her legs barely obeyed her. The man stopped a few feet away, crouched slightly to meet her eyes. "What are you doing out here, little one?" His voice was deep but gentle. Emily didn't answer. She pressed her lips together, ashamed, afraid. He glanced at the locked door, then back at her trembling form. His jaw tightened. Without another word, he slipped off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. The weight swallowed her small body, but warmth spread through her instantly. "No child should be sitting outside in the cold," he said quietly. "Where's your family?" Her voice came out as little more than a whisper. "They locked me out." The man's eyes darkened. He looked at the door once more, then knelt closer, his hand resting gently on the porch floor instead of reaching for her. His presence carried strength, but also patience. Emily, for the first time in months, didn't feel invisible. She lowered her gaze, unsure if she should say more. But the coat was warm. His voice was kind. For a fragile moment, hope flickered in her chest. "If you're here with me in Emily's story, tell me in the comments, what would you do if you saw a child left out in the cold? Your voice matters. And don't forget to like this video so more people can discover Cryspire. Every small action helps us keep telling stories that deserve to be heard." Emily sat frozen on the porch steps, her tiny body swallowed by the man's heavy coat. It smelled faintly of leather, of smoke, of something unfamiliar yet comforting. Her trembling slowed, not because the night grew any warmer, but because his presence made the darkness feel less endless. For once, she wasn't invisible. The man stayed still for a moment, crouched beside her. He didn't bombard her with questions. He simply waited, his eyes steady, giving her space. Emily had almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone's patience, to be looked at without judgment, without disgust. Finally, her voice broke the silence. "My dad, he doesn't know." The man tilted his head, his brows drawing together. "Doesn't know what?" Emily's throat tightened. She picked at a frayed thread on her sweater sleeve, unable to meet his gaze. That she locks me out sometimes. That she hides his letters. He thinks I'm fine. Her eyes brimmed with tears. But I'm not. The words hung heavy in the frozen air. The man's jaw clenched. His eyes shifted to the window, where yellow light spilled through the cracks in the curtains. Inside, shadows moved, her stepmother and stepsister eating the meal Emily had helped prepare. Their laughter rang out faintly, cruel and careless. His face hardened. "What's your name, little one?" His tone softened again. "Emily." He nodded, repeating it under his breath like a promise. "Emily. You shouldn't be out here. Not tonight. Not ever." Emily's lips trembled. No one had ever said that to her before, not with such certainty. For so long, she had convinced herself that maybe she deserved the cold, that maybe silence and punishment were the only things meant for her. But this stranger's words cracked something inside her, letting a small ember of hope glow in the ashes. Before she could speak again, the front door flew open with a slam. The stepmother's silhouette filled the frame, her voice cutting through the night. "What's going on out here?" Emily flinched, shrinking back, her heart pounding. She expected the man to retreat, to mutter an apology and leave like others before him. But he didn't move. Slowly, deliberately, he rose to his full height. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his figure outlined against the warm light pouring from inside. His voice, when he spoke, was steady but sharp. "Are you the one responsible for this child?" The stepmother folded her arms tightly. "I am. And it's none of your concern how I discipline her. She needs to learn respect. If that means spending time outside, then so be it. Go on your way, stranger." The man's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing. Leaving an 8-year-old out in the freezing night is not discipline. It's cruelty. And yes, his voice dropped lower, more dangerous, "It is my concern now." Her lips curled into a mocking smile. "Oh, listen to you. Big hero. Do you plan to take her away? You don't even know who we are." The man's gaze sharpened. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at Emily, then back to the woman. His silence was heavy, almost unbearable. "Finally," he said, "maybe it's you who doesn't know who I am." Emily's breath caught. She didn't understand fully, but something in his voice made her shiver, not with cold this time, but with anticipation. The stepmother scoffed and waved a hand dismissively. "You're trespassing. Leave before I call the sheriff." But there was a flicker in her eyes, a tremor she couldn't hide. Emily clutched the coat tighter around herself, her tiny fingers digging into the fabric. Her heart beat fast, caught between fear of her stepmother's wrath and the strange safety she felt near this man. He crouched down again, ignoring the woman at the door, and looked at Emily. His voice was gentle, careful. "Don't be afraid. Nobody is going to hurt you tonight. Not while I'm here." Emily stared at him, wide-eyed. She wanted to believe. She wanted so desperately to trust those words. For months, she had been told she was nothing, that no one cared enough to stand up for her. Yet here was someone, a stranger, who had not turned away, who spoke as if her suffering mattered. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, a single tear slid down her cheek, carving a line of warmth against the cold. Behind them, the stepmother slammed the door halfway shut, muttering curses under her breath. But her hands trembled against the wood. The night grew still again. The snowflakes fell softer, almost soundless. Emily remained wrapped in the coat, the man's promise echoing in her ears. For the first time in so long, she didn't feel entirely alone. The porch light flickered once, as if the house itself hesitated. Emily tightened her grip on the coat, eyes darting between the man and the half-closed door. The stepmother stood framed by the warm glow inside, one hand on the knob, the other on her hip, jaw locked in a hard line. "Last warning," she snapped. "Leave. No." The man didn't move. He set his palm on the rail as if anchoring himself there and spoke without raising his voice. "I will leave when I know this child is safe." The stepmother scoffed. "Safe? She's dramatic. She'll cry about anything to get attention." Emily's cheeks burned. She'd been called that word before, dramatic, whenever she winced at a slap or dared to say she was cold. She sank deeper into the coat, trying to make herself smaller, trying not to disappear. The man lowered himself to a knee again. "Emily," he said gently, "do you remember your father's full name?" Her lips parted. She glanced at the stepmother, then back to him. "James? James Carter." The stepmother's fingers tightened around the knob. The man swallowed, looking at the wood grain beneath his hand, then back up. "Emily," he said, and his voice thinned, just a fraction, "I am James Carter." The night went quiet except for a far-off car on the road and the hiss of the wind against the eaves. Emily stared, lost between hope and fear. For months she had held his memory like a picture in a pocket, worn, cherished, almost faded. She blinked, and the man didn't vanish. He didn't look away. "Daddy?" It came out like a question she was afraid to ask. He nodded once, quickly, like he was afraid if he took too long he might fall apart. "It's me, my little one." The stepmother recovered first. "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "You can't just show up, Anne." "Show up to my own house," he said, turning his head slowly toward her. "I wired money every month. I called. I sent letters." His gaze hardened. "You told me she was thriving." Emily clutched the edge of the coat. He'd come back. He was here. The porch that had always felt like a punishment suddenly felt like a boundary she could cross. The stepmother tried to smile, but it came out tight and wrong. "We had a misunderstanding tonight. She broke a rule. A short time outside never hurt anyone. You're making this bigger than locking a child out in freezing temperatures?" His voice was still quiet, but there was iron in it. "How long has this been going on?" She rolled her eyes, reaching for a laugh that didn't come. "You know how kids exaggerate." He looked at Emily instead. "Has this happened before?" She didn't trust her voice, so she nodded. "Once. Twice." He shut his eyes for a second. When he opened them, something in his face had changed, like a door inside him had swung open and there was nothing left between him and the truth. "Inside," he said, but not to the stepmother. He slipped an arm beneath Emily's knees, another behind her back. "I'm taking you in." Emily flinched, not from fear, but from the shock of being lifted so easily. The coat slid as he stood, and she felt the steady thud of his heartbeat under her cheek. He smelled like cold air and the faint spice of aftershave she remembered from the mornings when he'd kissed her head before leaving for work. The stepmother stepped forward, blocking the threshold. "You can't just walk in here, Anne." James didn't raise his voice. "Move." For a heartbeat the woman held her ground. Then she shifted, just enough. He carried Emily through the doorway. Warmth washed over them, stale heat from the old radiator, the lingering scent of soup, the wax of the wooden floor. The living room looked the same as always, a sagging couch, a crooked family photo on the wall, the small lamp with the frayed shade. Emily had cleaned that table earlier, a wet ring from the soup pot still shone on the wood. James set her on the couch and tucked the coat around her again. "Stay right here," he said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." He turned to the stepmother. "Where are the letters I sent?" She lifted her chin. "In a drawer, probably. I didn't throw them away." "Which drawer?" Silence. He didn't wait. He crossed the room, pulled open the small sideboard. Stacks of envelopes slid forward, rubber-banded together. He thumbed through the top one and saw his own tight handwriting, all the dates. Some were unopened. Most had been slit cleanly at the top. He picked another stack, receipts, bank notices, transfers. All there, all neat. "Did she see any of these?" he asked without looking up. "She knew you wrote," the stepmother said. "I read them to her." James looked at Emily. "Is that true?" Emily shook her head. He set the letters on the table with care, as if they might break. "You told me she was in piano. You told me she got a new coat. You told me you baked together on Sundays." The stepmother forced a laugh. "We did bake. Sometimes. And we were going to get a coat. By locking her outside to measure how badly she needed one?" The words came out flat. From the hallway, soft footsteps. The stepsister appeared, clutching a bowl, eyes wide. She looked from her mother to James to Emily on the couch. She set the bowl down, unsure. "Go to your room," the stepmother snapped. James's phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't take his eyes off the woman as he answered. "Mark," he said, and Emily remembered his friend who used to bring her small toys from airports. "I'm at the house." "Yes. It's worse than we thought. Can you call Child Protective Services and the sheriff's office? I want this on record. A beat. And bring a coat for Emily. And a medic, if you can find one willing to check her here." The stepmother's voice rose. "You can't call the police on me in my own home." He ended the call. "Then you should have thought about the law before you put a child in danger." She took a step closer, then faltered. She was disobedient. She needed boundaries." Her voice softened, pleading now. "James, I tried. She's difficult." James glanced at Emily. She tightened the coat around herself, not saying a word. Difficult. She'd heard that too. Difficult when she cried. Difficult when she didn't. Difficult when she was hungry, when she was tired, when she got a math problem wrong, when she cleaned too slowly. He turned back to the woman. "She's 8. They stood like that, locked in a quiet standoff that felt heavier than any shouting match. Emily could feel the air in the room shift, like dust settling after a long, long time. The doorbell rang. Everyone jumped. The stepmother hissed, "Who is that at this hour?" James opened the door. A man in a dark coat stepped in quickly, shaking off snow. "Mark," he said, offering a small smile to Emily before his face sobered. "CPS is sending someone. Sheriff has a deputy nearby, he's on his way." He turned to James. "You okay?" "I will be," James said. "She needs a coat and a proper check." The flashing lights outside painted the snow in streaks of red and blue. Emily sat on the couch, her father's coat wrapped tightly around her, while James remained by her side like a shield that would not move. The stepmother hovered near the hallway, pale and restless, her eyes darting between the deputy at the door and the friend, Mark, who had fetched blankets and tea. Emily clutched the mug with both hands. The steam rose against her face, thawing the last edges of numbness from her skin. She tried to focus on the warmth, on the steady rhythm of her father's breathing beside her. But her heart still pounded every time the stepmother's heels clicked on the wooden floor. The deputy finished a short call on his radio, then stepped into the room. "CPS is 2 minutes out," he said. "We'll need statements from everyone." James nodded once, calm but tense. "She'll speak to Emily too, won't she?" "Yes, sir. The social worker will want to hear directly from her." Emily's stomach twisted. She had never been asked to tell her side before. She had always been told what to say, what to hide. Her stepmother's words echoed in her memory: "If you tell anyone, they'll think you're a liar. They'll take you away and you'll have nothing." James must have seen the panic in her face. He leaned close, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You don't have to be afraid. Just tell the truth. That's all." She swallowed hard and nodded. The doorbell rang again. The deputy opened it, and a woman stepped in, brushing snow from her coat. She had a clipboard tucked under one arm and a kind expression that softened the edges of the night. "Good evening. I'm Ms. Harris with Child Protective Services." James stood. "Thank you for coming so quickly." She nodded, scanning the room, her eyes lingering on Emily with a mix of concern and gentleness. "This is the child?" "Yes. My daughter, Emily Carter." The stepmother barked out a short laugh. "Now he claims her as his daughter? He's been gone for months. He doesn't know what's really been happening." James's gaze cut toward her like a blade. "I know enough." Ms. Harris raised a hand. "Let's keep this calm. I need to hear from each of you. But first, Emily." Emily's grip tightened on the mug. Her throat closed, but she felt her father's hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "Not pushing. Just steady." "Emily," Ms. Harris said softly, crouching to meet her eye level. "Can you tell me why you were outside tonight?" Emily's lips trembled. She looked at her stepmother, who glared back with sharp warning. Her voice almost failed her, but James's hand gave a small squeeze. "She locked me out," Emily whispered. Ms. Harris tilted her head. "How long were you out there?" Emily swallowed. "Since dinner started. I don't know how long. It was dark. It was cold." The stepmother interjected quickly. "She's exaggerating. It was 10 minutes at most." The deputy cut her off. "Ma'am, let the child speak." Emily's tears spilled. It wasn't the first time. Sometimes she hides Dad's letters. She says I can't answer them. She says I'm difficult. James's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, letting her speak. Ms. Harris wrote notes, her expression grave. "Emily, thank you. You're very brave for telling me." The stepmother's voice turned shrill. "She's manipulating you. She always does this when she wants attention." Mark, who had been quiet in the corner, stood suddenly. "With respect, ma'am, I found her fingers nearly frostbitten. That's not attention-seeking. That's survival." The room fell heavy. The radiator hissed softly. Emily wiped her eyes with the sleeve of the coat, exhausted from speaking, but lighter somehow. The truth was out in the open now, floating between them like fragile glass. Ms. Harris straightened. "Emily will not remain in this environment tonight. She will go with her father until further investigation is complete." The stepmother gasped. "You can't do that." This is my house. The deputy stepped forward, his voice firm. Ma'am, you're welcome to provide your statement. But the decision is made. She's leaving with him tonight. The stepmother's mask cracked then, fury twisting her face into something raw and desperate. After everything I did for her? After all the sacrifices? James's voice came low and steady. Sacrifices don't leave a child on a porch in the snow. Emily's small hand slipped into his. His grip closed gently around hers, warm and sure. The stepmother backed away, muttering, her voice losing ground. For the first time, she looked smaller, like the power she'd wielded so easily had dissolved into nothing. Miss Harris turned to Emily. Do you want to take a few things with you tonight? Emily blinked. The question felt foreign. She had never been asked what she wanted. Slowly, she nodded. My picture, in my room. And my book. James stood. We'll get them together. They walked down the hallway. Emily's room was small, the wallpaper peeling, but it was hers. She pulled a faded photograph of her and her father from under the pillow, the edges curled from constant handling. She clutched it to her chest. Then she grabbed the worn book of fairy tales he used to read to her. James's eyes softened as he watched her pack those two precious things into a small bag. We'll add to that soon, he said quietly. This is just the beginning. When they returned to the living room, the deputy and Miss Harris were finalizing papers. The stepmother sat slumped in a chair, silent now, her eyes fixed on the floor. Ready? James asked Emily. She nodded, slipping her hand back into his. They stepped out into the cold night together, but this time Emily didn't shiver. Wrapped in his coat, holding his hand, she felt a warmth that no frost could steal. The flashing lights faded as they walked toward the car. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily wasn't walking toward punishment. She was walking toward home. The drive was quiet, except for the steady hum of the tires over the icy road. Emily leaned against the window, her father's coat wrapped around her like armor. Streetlights passed overhead in slow rhythm, casting golden flashes across her tired face. She clutched the small bag on her lap, the photo and the fairy tale book safe inside. James glanced at her every few moments, his hands steady on the wheel. Each time he looked, his chest tightened at how small she seemed in the seat. Small, but still holding on. Are you warm enough? He asked softly. She nodded. Warmer than before. His lips pressed into a thin smile. Good. We'll get you a better coat tomorrow. Something thick enough for a real winter. Emily's voice was tentative. With mittens? He let out a soft laugh, one that cracked with emotion. With mittens. And boots. And anything else you need. Silence filled the car again, but it was no longer heavy. For Emily, it was the kind of silence that let her breathe without fear of being scolded. For James, it was a silence full of promises, unspoken vows that this time, he would not let distance blind him to the truth. They pulled into the driveway of a modest but warm-looking house. Lights glowed through the curtains, and a small wreath hung on the door. Emily blinked. She remembered this house from long ago, before everything had changed. James turned off the engine and faced her. This is home now. For as long as you want it to be. She hesitated before whispering, will you leave again? The question broke him. He reached across the seat, gently taking her hand. No, Emily. Never like before. I should have been here to protect you, and I wasn't. But that ends tonight. You'll never be alone like that again. Her throat ached as she nodded, holding his hand tighter. Inside, the house smelled of wood polish and cinnamon. James had left it in the care of his friend while he traveled, and it carried a sense of safety she had almost forgotten existed. The living room was warm, the fireplace glowing with a low flame. Emily's eyes wandered, landing on a shelf filled with books, a basket of blankets, a small table set for two. Everything seemed to whisper welcome. James knelt in front of her, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "You're safe here. Tomorrow we'll call the school, get things sorted with the social worker. But tonight you rest." He guided her to the couch, tucking a blanket around her. Emily clutched her book of fairy tales. "Will you read to me? Like before?" His chest ached, but in the best way. He took the book, opened to a familiar story, and began to read. His voice was deep, steady, the same rhythm she remembered falling asleep to years ago. The words washed over her like a lullaby. Halfway through the story, her eyelids fluttered. She tried to stay awake, afraid that if she slept, she might wake up back on that porch, cold and forgotten. But James's voice anchored her, and the warmth of the blanket pulled her gently into dreams. When she finally slept, James closed the book quietly and brushed a kiss against her forehead. He whispered, "You're home, Emily. For good." He stayed beside her until the fire dimmed, listening to the sound of her steady breathing. For the first time in months, both father and daughter could rest without fear. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Cryspire. Your support helps us bring more stories of children like Emily, stories that deserve to be heard. Together, we can make sure voices like hers are never silenced again.